Well, I used to keep my money in a cookie jar. It was shaped like a cat, it was a present from my brother. I read a lot of books, but I couldn't see between the lines. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't.
There we are. We're good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, man. Look, three guys with glasses.
Right. The
Bunch of
it's the
nerds.
glasses guys. It's the nerd guys. Yeah, well, come on, we know we're nerds, right? So Paulie had just been talking about he wants to get an old percolator, and I have a story. Like the only time we use it though is during hurricanes because we blew up our car battery trying to use a coffee pot. Like we figured, it's just a coffee pot. How much can it draw? It blew every fuse in the goddamn car trying to run the coffee pot off the car. So we got ourselves a percolator.
I don't even know why you were trying to run a coffee pot off of the car.
Because we were Hurricane Katrina. We had to. There was no electricity. I mean, not Katrina, but one of the hurricanes. So we didn't have power, and so we thought, well, let's just, we'll make some coffee. And so we bought a percolator, and it only makes like a cup and a half, so we have to like keep making, pots.
So where'd you find the old-fashioned percolator? The one that goes on
at a
fire?
thrift store, actually, like a Goodwill kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
A couple of years ago, I forget which storm it was that knocked power out here for a week or so. And Julia and I had gone for a walk in the neighborhood, and a couple of streets behind us, there were these two women that had the back of their SUV open. And like kind of the large, it's not a carafe, but it's like a large, maybe like 30 cup thing that has a little spigot on the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
You would see it like a after church function or something like that, Right. They had one of those plugged into their car battery into a converter, and they were just like serving coffee to anybody that walked up that wanted some hot coffee. I was like, how sweet is that? Like, what nice people.
Good morning, Mark. How you doing, Mark? Nice to see you. Glad you came and showed
All
up.
right. So I think without further ado, we can dive in on the discussion of the Get Back film that aired on Disney this weekend. And
8 hours to discuss, so let's get moving.
Oh, man. But first of all, I had my friend Scotty Moore in town as they were showing the previews and the trailers and stuff. And he's a director from up in New York. And he was just blown away he kept repeating how beautiful it looks. Peter Jackson restored it so beautifully that you feel like you're sitting in the room with them. And it doesn't feel like it's from 1969. It feels like these guys are just making a record. You're sort of transported back in time, or else they're transported here. But either way, it's alive,
Yeah.
I thought it looked pretty too. I mean, I figured that they had nice cameras that were filming it, so I figured it wasn't that much of a restoration. It was, but maybe I don't know. It seemed like he just went back to the originals.
They'd originally filmed it on 16 millimeter for television, and then the original Let It Be, they blew it up to, I guess, what is it, 35 millimeter? So the original film is super grainy and dark and really poorly edited, very choppy. And then a lot of what they ended up doing was kind of like a lot of the original footage is like blown up. And then because of the way that the zooms are blown up, so even when they blew it up to 35 millimeter, it looked really kind of rough. So there was a lot of restoration and like, from what I understand, Peter Jackson developed a lot of AI technology for this documentary to restore the film, to restore the footage, but also to take a lot of the audio from the Twickenham scenes, which were all just recorded on like a mono Nagra tape recorder. Like none of that is multi-tracked. So they developed an AI system that would go in and pull out the guitar and the bass and the drums, be able to isolate all the different tracks. Because what they started doing when they started kind of snipping and fighting at each other, and they realized everything was being recorded, somebody's just always playing a guitar while they're fighting or talking to hide it from the microphone that Michael Lindsay Hogg has going. So all these conversations are obscured by them playing guitar. So once they could isolate that and pull that out, now you got all this great conversation that was never really completely, understandable or discernible beforehand. It's really pretty amazing what he did with it.
And since you brought up Beetlejuice, Michael Lindsay Hogg, what a horrifying little boy. First of all, he wants to do it in Tripoli in this grand theater, which isn't like anything the Beatles have ever. It's nothing. It's not Beatles. It's what Ringo's trying to tell him. Our biggest base is America and the UK. Why do we want to go to play in Africa? And then the other thing. So he starts coming up with ideas, and he goes, "Well, what about a children's hospital?" And somebody goes, "A children's hospital?" And he goes, "Well, not the really sick children." I'm like, "Oh my God, you didn't just say that, did you? Jesus!" And then he goes, "How about an orphanage?"
I love when he said
like,
that.
How about somebody
Lenin's
just
eyes get real big.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God. And then an orphanage was the next suggestion. It's just like, okay, try and think of a few more things that would be as exploitative as possible, and then go take a tea break. Would you, kid?
Right. Well, Paul walks off to go talk to John on the phone, and Linda's there, and she's like, "Look, I just saw Help the other day, and it's about them. It doesn't matter where we put them. It's just, we love the Beatles or whatever." And he starts telling Linda that he's a bigger fan than she is, and I was just like, "Okay, yeah, all right." Yeah, she married one, but yeah, you're the big fan.
Yeah, she's sleeping with one, but if you think you can top that, Lindsay, please do.
I feel like I read about it once and forgot until recently, but apparently Michael Lindsay Hogg may or may not be Orson Welles' son. There's
that's
a history
great.
About that.
That's fantastic. He is, and I'm not disparaging the Let It Be movie. I tend to agree with what Ringo had to say about it, which was that it was a little dark, and it didn't really show the joy. Now, in fairness to him, it was for theatrical release and could only be 90 minutes long or however long it was. And out of 56 hours of footage, he tried to present a narrative, and he did, of a band breaking up, essentially. This was a band trying to find itself, and really, by the end of the movie, a band that found itself. They come into the studio after 18 months of not having been together, and in that 18 months, there's been some estrangement. There's been some arguing and some, growing up, falling in love with women and moving on with their lives as young men. They're 28 years old now. They're not the lads anymore. And so they come, and then it's whoever's idea to do the TV special, which was an insane idea in the first place. Let's write 14 new songs that we're going to do live on television and record it live, and that's going to be the record. Like, what bucking balls? How many you got? None. Like literally they had none.
Well, if I can interject real quick to make a small correction on your timeline. So they got together in January. The White Album had come out in November the previous year. I think they finished recording it end of August. So August to January was the only break they had. And in that time also, remember, John and Yoko had a miscarriage at the end of November. So they're coming in fresh off of this life-shattering trauma into like, all right, let's be creative. And
it's also in the
their drug intake is also escalating. So it's a rough time to go into the project.
I'd heard George say in interviews that he hated being in Twickenham Film Studios because there was no vibe. It was big, it was cavernous, it was cold because it was January. And you can see that they're quite uncomfortable. They're trying to become intimate again with all this nonsense going on around them in a very unfamiliar surrounding. And in episode 2, the mood totally changes. Of course, they've made up with George, which is one thing, but they're on familiar grounds. They're in Apple, which they've all hung out in countless times. And they have all the EMI engineers there because Magic Alex provided nothing. And it's the mood is far more upbeat. And it's odd how throughout the parts 1 and 2, they keep saying, well, it's going to be weird if we don't have a piano player because this one needs a piano and who's going to play guitar, and they keep talking about.
They didn't want to overdub. He mentioned that when Billy Preston comes in, he says we don't want to overdub.
Right, but I'm saying like they've been talking about it for 2, films for 4 hours, and all of a sudden Billy Preston walks in to say hello, and they're like, "Hey, a piano player!" It was such a Beatles magic moment. Like, we need a piano player. Here's one of the greatest in the world. You want to play?
Right.
Well, there's kind of this great little sprinkle. Some point in the early parts of episode 2, when they finally get over to Apple and they're just kind of talking about what they've been up to in the evenings, and George mentions that he had been to see Ray Charles was in town and Billy Preston was there, and just mentioned how great he was. Didn't say anything about we should get him. It just, and then it just happens a few days later.
Yeah, that was
pops
great.
in to say hello, and it's that Beatle dumb luck magic, like you said.
Yeah, fantastic. And parts he played, as soon as he started playing, you're like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine Don't Let Me Down without that keyboard part. I couldn't imagine I've Got a Feeling without that counterpoint part he's doing to the guitar. Mm-hmm. It's like he came in and played everything that was missing.
Yeah.
He definitely filled in the, it was the missing ingredient. And they knew it too. As soon as and the other thing that's interesting is like they kind of got in better behavior once Billy showed up. Like suddenly everybody was they were a little bit better behaved.
They've all said that in interviews whenever they had like Eric Clapton sitting in or Billy Preston sitting in, that John Lennon said it was like company's here, get children how to behave.
What do you think about the flower pot conversation?
Oh, sorry.
The flower pot conversation.
That was incredible.
That was pretty.
Where it's John and Paul talking.
Yeah,
that was pretty eye opening to see them both kind of being aware of the way that they treated George over the years.
Well,
and I think it was also
I thought
interesting.
I thought Lennon was very skillful at also saying, and you kind of do that to me too.
Yes, he did say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like we're equals, but you're not treating me like an equal, pal. And he's not saying fuck you or anything. He's being really soft. He's going easy on McCartney. Because McCartney has been really kind of overbearing, but I think he's been overbearing because Harrison clearly didn't even want to be there when it started. He's been off jamming with great musicians, and they love his songs, and he wants that atmosphere. And Lennon, like you said, is traumatized and he just wants to be with Yoko, and Ringo's like waiting for something to happen. So McCartney was, I don't think he was pushy. I think he was trying to ignite a spark.
Yeah. I think he comes off way more empathetic in this than history has led him to be, where everyone's like, oh, Paul took over the band and he was bossy. I think he saw rightfully that they were like a ship without a rudder after Brian died, and was like, well, if no one else is going to try to, write the course, like, I'll do it because I don't want to not do this. I want to be here. And, once it got to a point where nobody else was kind of pulling weight, I think he kind of felt kind of at wit's end. And there's that moment in the first section where he's like, I have to be the boss, and I don't want to be the boss.
Right.
But no one else is doing anything, and I'm not getting any support, and I feel like an asshole.
There's also the scene, too, where George has left, and they're sitting in there. First, they're jamming, like the three-piece that sounds like Nirvana. They're so rocking. They're just letting it out. And I thought it was great that he jammed with Yoko, and showed that he was actually into the avant-garde scene before Lennon was, and so he was open to the shit. But then they all sit down and like the sort of madness of the music ends, and they're talking about what to do, and his eyes just moisten. He's near tears. Yeah. He's just, and that's really poignant because, if you're in a band, the moment where you realize it's over, even if you want to get out, it's still a poignant moment.
I noticed the same thing. The eyes when they were waiting for John to show up. It was him and Ringo, and they weren't sure if after the weekend meeting, they weren't sure, and it just kind of focused in on Paul for a second. You can actually see him. Looks like he's welling up and trying not to,
I think that's what I'm talking about, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Anyway, you were saying?
I think he says, at that point he says, like, and then there were two. And it just kind of, like, slowly, like, catches his face, and it's like, oh, it's so heavy. But there's a moment at the very end of episode 1 where George has left, and they've had their kind of, like, freak out for the afternoon, which I thought was interesting. Like, they're doing like this noise jam, and Paul's like jumping on the scaffolding. Like they're turning into children. They're having like a Lord of the Flies childlike freak out, which is understandable. But there's this great moment where the three of them kind of like close ranks in a real tight circle and are talking kind of like face to face to each other, and their arms are kind of all around each other's waist, and it's that they're having that like, what the fuck are we going to do here, y'all, kind of conversation. Yeah. And they start, and Peter Jackson brilliantly puts, isn't it a pity over it? And oh my God, watching that was just like, that was, I think, the first time I got like weepy watching this, where it was like, Paul talks a lot about, in like the 80s and 90s about, questioning his actual relationship with John? Were they really as close as he thought they were? And like that right there, like that's 3 blood brothers like going through the shit together. That's the affection and love right there. That really made me go like, oh my God, this is incredible to see.
By the way, Debbie Davis just posted that she's really enjoying listening to us 3 nerds.
Yes, Yoko. What's he saying? But oh yeah, the singing. Yeah, they did do the when they're doing. Yeah, I think the avant-garde thing you were talking about, where she's just making all that screechy noise.
You know, that was her bit. You know, and it's like when Lennon and Yoko came out of retirement to make Double Fantasy, it was because he was down in the Bahamas with Sean, and he heard the B-52s, and he heard him doing the vocal thing, and he called her up and he said, "Mother, get your axe down. They're doing you on the radio." And the B-52s later said, yeah, they were influenced by her stuff, man. So there was now she wasn't mainstream pop like they were, but there was a resistance to her on a lot of levels. It was the 60s, and racism was a problem then like it isn't these days.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a very short through line from her to like Velvet Underground of noise that is rock and roll, but it's not your normal sense of rock and roll. And you know, like you said, McCartney was into the avant-garde thing before John was, and I think their willingness to explore that, you know, I don't think there's always, you know, talk of like, you know, John wanted Yoko in the band, and I don't think it's quite that, but like I think he wanted the band to have the fearlessness to explore the kind of ideas that she brought to him to explore, that they never quite got to on a public sense.
She's the first female to ever sing a main vocal on a Beatles record with "Happiness Is a Warm Gun." So she appeared on the record. You know, I don't know how they felt about that, but it certainly worked. You know, her voice on that really worked long before I knew her voice.
Yeah, and you know, Patty Boyd is in Yellow Submarine. Linda's in something. One of Paul's other girlfriends, Francie Schwartz, is on something from '68. I forget. Like they all kind of make different appearances throughout like the later part of the years, but like no one ever talks about it because it's not like this in-your-face thing like Yoko's thing is, you know?
Right. It very much was, and I think it showed how much they loved each other. That it was just. That's just the way it was going to be, you know.
Yeah. You know, and I think the documentary was very fair to Yoko and very fair to Linda, and you know, Linda and Maureen, you know, Mo, Ringo's wife, they were there just as much as Yoko. I think it was very fair to them. They're, you know, the relationship that Paul and Yoko have is very different because he and John were best friends. And when someone pulls that attention away from your best friend, there's always resentment, whether it's intentional or subconscious. You know, and I think the documentary does a lot of good at, you know, ending kind of the trope of Yoko broke up the Beatles. No, she didn't. She was just sitting there reading all their fucking mail. They have so much mail and paperwork to go through. Like she's always going through paperwork or like reading the paper. Like, I thought it was really a nice play to them. And I don't know how much she had a say in it. I know she's listed as a producer, but I don't think she's in great health anymore. And Sean's kind of running everything from their end, I think. So I don't know that she necessarily had the final say on it.
And is Ringo the most patient person in the planet? Just, I mean, he's always just sort of sitting there waiting for the next thing to happen. Like Paul said, he's just there. Just, when do you need me? Okay.
You know, they really had a great shorthand too. I mean, like, you know, George had a Hare Krishna monk sitting in the corner in the first episode, and of course Lennon goes, "Who's that little old man?" And Paul goes, "He's clean though."
Clean though.
Figured out a hard day's night, you know, and just like he tells Ringo what to play on, I think it was Long and Winding Road, and Lennon instantly goes, "Arthur Alexander," And the beat from Anna and In My Life was what he was referring to, but they know each other so well. Even things like, well, that bit right there doesn't work, but if you put the other bit in front of it that was in front of the other bit earlier, that bit would work then. And because they're in a band, it made complete sense. They knew exactly what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And waiting for them to get the line for Get Back, right? Where they're just like sitting there kind of bouncing lines back and forth, him and John, getting the California Grass. And you're just like, and you've been there, right? Where you just kind of throwing it. It's right there.
Sure.
I mean, it's 2 lines later. It's just right. They just have to shorten things up a little bit, but it's just funny to watch him kind of go through that,
Even when JoJo left his home in, something Arizona, and when he comes up with Tucson, Lennon just gets a big smile, like, that's the shit, that's it.
Right. It was fun watching that bit.
Watching Paul come up with that kind of out of nowhere, I think is one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen. Like, that should be in the Smithsonian,
it's
forever.
strumming.
That was brilliant to watch.
Strumming one chord on bass guitar, and all of a sudden, 2 notes, 3, then lyrics along with the 2 notes, and then you're just like, motherfucker just wrote it in front of me. Wow.
And it's watching him discard ideas that's even more impressive.
Yeah.
Like, he's pulling ideas, and that doesn't work, and then another one comes, and it's like, I was thinking it's like watching a sculptor take a piece of rock and chisel away all the parts you don't need until you have your statue. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen a human being do in real time.
Ironically, he was way better at doing that for his own songs, which you could tell he heard in his head complete, and he's trying to get the other Beatles to play as close to what he's hearing in his head as possible. Whereas in Lennon's case, Lennon's a bit more free with letting people come up with ideas, and he came up with that harmony idea on Don't Let Me Down, McCartney did, that just doesn't work. It just didn't work. Nobody ever
the answer.
Love me. The call and answer thing, and it didn't work from the start, and he really kind of kept it in there, forced it. And Lennon was pretty tolerant about leaving it in there before George finally went, that bit doesn't work at all. It's awful.
Yeah.
And George seemed to enjoy that moment, too.
They're so blunt with each other. Like, and you will understand what I'm saying because you were in a band with me, and the band I was in back in the 90s. If we'd have said something like, that chord you're playing, it's passé. Fighting words, man. Fucking fighting words. Oh, my chord passé? Motherfucker, you wrote blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Right.
I did find it interesting. There's so much weight given to the argument with George and Paul, where George says, I'll play if you want me to, or I won't play at all. Whatever it is that will please you, I'll do it. And that's always given like the weight of like, oh, this is what really leads to the breakup. And when you watch the whole thing in context, I just turned to Julia and I was like, every band has this fight ad nauseum. This is not
an
earth-shattering moment.
Very manipulative of Michael Lindsay Hogg in making Paul look like the bad guy to take that comment, which George clearly now we know made in regard to the creation of Let It Be and the passé chord comment, and make it look like it's Paul insisting on that lead guitar part that George plays on I've Got a Feeling, which George probably came up with himself. But it looks like Paul saying, no, it needs to be like a waterfall, and then George gets fed up there. And I thought, well, that's very interesting that he just took that conversation from someplace else and created an argument that didn't exist.
Yeah, I thought that was really eye-opening to see the whole thing in context. That.
But once you heard him suggest the children's hospital, but not the really sick children, you understood everything you needed to know.
But guys, look, you guys are writers. That you talking about the Get Back thing. How many times have we sat in a room and done the very same thing? Paul, me and you have sat in the same room, done the very same thing, throwing ideas back and forth until finally one clicks and you go, oh yeah, that's the one that works.
But I don't ever recall.
I get it. It's Get Back.
I don't ever saying that's awful or that's passé or I'm a little more ginger with the people I write with.
We were a little more honest.
Were you that way in your 20s?
Right. We were a little more honest with each other. Like if we, not always, but you guys had some y'all said some things. Maybe you just talked behind each other's backs is what it was instead of
we definitely didn't. Yeah. Oh yeah. In Cowboy Mouth, it was all behind your back. Everything was,
Right. I hate that goddamn song.
You were lucky you knew where you were playing that night. There was so much going on behind your back.
It's like, oh, they guys playing that song again. I hate that goddamn. Oh, Paul, it's a great song. I love it. That fucking song. I can't stand. I thought it all. I don't know. It is interesting to have those egos all. And John, the first half, like you guys, I didn't realize that he'd just gone through that thing, but watching the first part of it, where I don't know if he said 3 words during the first bit of it, where he's just there. It seemed like. Yeah. Maybe
he's also he and Yoko are taking heroin at this point, and that initial stretch at Twickenham, he's markedly unenthused and kind of out of the ballpark. He just seems kind of vacant when you do see him, and even when he's singing, you can tell his voice is rough. He even makes a comment about like, I haven't been treating my body well at some point. Once they move, I think when George leaves, it kind of scares him, not straight, but it makes him kind of shake the cobwebs off and figure his shit out for a little bit and get back into it. And he's markedly more alert throughout the rest of it.
Yeah.
There's a bit in the first one where it says, John and Yoko are doing an interview for Canadian television, and that interview exists. It has for a long time on YouTube, and throughout the interview, he is obviously just out of his gourd, smacked out. And at one point, stops the interview and gets up because he's going to go be sick, and then comes back and he has a bit more color in his face. But that, I think, is the same day that Peter Sellers comes by, and he's, they're all that whole section's very strange too. Like
that was a strange section. It was so awkward.
Yeah, it's very awkward. And Sellers makes a comment about like, don't leave your needles in the bathroom or something. Like, it's all very odd, and I don't know what was cut from that overall conversation at the end of the day, but there's some strangeness happening there.
Yeah, very strange. And then the thing, I know Mikey hasn't seen episode 3, but that in episode 3 they play on the roof. And the thing about it is, throughout episode 2, and more so even in episode 3, it's the other 3 who are now on about, let's do something live, and they're suggesting places that they can't get to, Primrose or wherever it was, Albert Hall. And McCartney's just like, you can see he doesn't want to do it. For the first time in the film, he's the one that's saying, I don't think that we're ready to play live, and we don't have enough songs. And he keeps coming up with excuses. And then they wind up on the rooftop, which right to the end, he didn't want to go. He's there, she's sitting downstairs, and he goes, well, I hear Ringo and John are upstairs on the roof, so I guess we're going on the roof. And he gets up there, and the exact thing that happened, that he wanted to happen in the first film, happens. He said, let's do it someplace where we'll get dragged off by the cops. And there they are, man. And he becomes like so animated when he sees the cops. He was having fun anyway, because they all loved playing together. Like, they were like, yeah, we rock. You could see it in their eyes. We fucking rock. But then when he sees the cops, he's thrilled. It's the end of the film he was looking for. Everything came full circle. Again, the Beatles' dumb luck magic.
Right.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome.
I thought the real MVPs of the day of the rooftop show were Mal Evans, who I'm glad gets a lot of camera time in the film because he's an unsung hero throughout their whole story. But then Jimmy the doorman and Debbie the receptionist, who basically like bamboozle the cops for a half hour and like keep them down in the lobby so they don't go pull the plug. It's great. I want to know their stories. What are they doing now? I want to hear their recollection of those days because that bit was phenomenal to me.
I'd love to know what happened
that
to Jimmy.
That whole bit.
He went from bamboozling the cop for like a half hour to being on the roof for the closing of the film. I'm like, hey, Jimmy. Jimmy made it to the top.
You got up there, pal. I thought that whole bit was so well done. Like, they put a camera down in the office of Apple, like in the reception area. So you see the cops come in, you hear the conversation, and then you see the cops just standing there and waiting, kind of patiently, like looking around. And the receptionist is just like, I don't know what's going on. They don't tell me anything. Playing completely coy. It was absolutely great.
Right.
I love that. That was so funny.
Fantastic.
One of my favorite moments too is like when they finally get Billy Preston in and they're starting to kind of play these songs, and John's like, I wish I had yesterday's voice today, because he had been singing it better yesterday before Billy shows up, and now Billy's there and he blew himself out the day before, singing. He's like,
right.
I was really sounding good yesterday, but today I'm not sounding. And I've been there. I've been there. Those rehearsals where you just give it your all, you feel great, and the next day you go to do the show and your voice is like half gone, and you're like, oh Jesus Christ, I blew myself out at rehearsal. Nice job, great going there. And the other thing is how much they just don't. They like half sing during these rehearsals. You know, I mean, it really is just to learn the parts. You know, the singing part's not really a problem for them. They don't have to worry about that part of it.
It's almost like I was thinking about it as they were singing with their mouths closed on Two of Us. It's almost like the playfulness aspect, coupled with the repetition of doing it, lends a joy that stays with the performance of the song later. You know what I'm saying? Because they're literally just having a ball learning the fucker. Instead of repeating it the same way over and over again, they're singing through clenched teeth. Ricardo's singing like that. You know, whatever they're doing. You know, and I thought, well, I wonder if, partly out of boredom, but partly to amuse each other, and partly so that it stays amusing until they're in the song. And I think part of that joy is palpable when they begin to play the songs.
Jonathan, I have a question for you. Since you're like the Beatles professor, I'm listening on the way up to Jackson. Me and my wife, we listened to "Let It Be Naked," and I mean, I always knew that the Beatles sped things up, you know. But I'm listening to and after hearing the movie for 2 days, listening to this, and it sounded like it was fucking racing. And I'm like, they had to have sped this one up too. Like Two of Us is like so fast. I'm like, there's no way they played it this fast. At least not based off what I saw from what they were doing. So I don't know. It just seemed like, like I said, they used to actually, plan where they were going to wind up and, play it.
Did you all have a lot of coffee to drink before you made the drive?
No, I don't know, but they felt fast. My God, the songs felt fast.
Just hearing it fast. Maybe you were on the highway drinking coffee and you were hearing it fast.
Maybe it's possible.
It could be. I don't think any of those tracks are sped up that I can recall. I can't speak completely on Let It Be Naked, but I don't think they're sped up.
And I tell you, listen to Two of Us and stuff. After watching the movie, just put it on and listen and go, Jesus Christ, did they really do it this fast? After playing it at a certain tempo that, you get used to hearing it over and over again. You kind of got the tempo in your head, and then you're like, Jesus, this is so fast. I mean, it's like significantly faster. And they may have just decided it needed to be faster. Who knows?
And Let It Be Naked kind of feels, in some cases they're different takes, they're different mixes. So they feel just overall like some of those songs feel like a different song altogether. So it might just be that it feels so different from the original Two of Us take that you're used to. Maybe that was like jarring enough to make you like feel like it was different. I don't know. That's interesting.
Now, Paul, did you say I missed it? But did you say that Paul said something about Across the Universe being corny or something like that the other day during our show?
No, he was telling John that when they had all John had was the chorus and the middle eight for "Don't Let Me Down." He kept saying as they're trying to learn it, he goes, "I know the song's kind of a bit corny, but if you do this and if you do that," and I just thought. And he said it like 6 times, and I just thought, if I was sitting there, I'd be like, motherfucker, you say corny one more time. You're going to be throwing these instruments on the floor. You're the motherfucker who wrote Your Mother Should Know. So you're the king of corn. Now get off my ass.
But at the same time, that may have been an in thing between them where they knew, the fact that he's doing such a basic, Don't Let Me Down, just as such a basic trope that's been heard before. Maybe that's kind of what he meant.
It could mean something completely different to Lennon's ears. But to my ears, it was like, he just called me corny. He said the thing to George about the chord being passe. I was like, did he just say passe? Motherfucker.
George never got over that Taxman solo, did he? And that's what they were trying to make the impression of. Just never got over the Taxman solo.
It didn't happen just once, It was, hey, George, I have an idea for a guitar solo and drive my car. Would you play bass on it? Great. Is George gone? Okay, we're going to be doing the bass again.
Jonathan, I got another one for you. So apparently, I was it doing 1, 2, 3? It was during McCartney 1, 2, 3, where he was talking about My Guitar Gently Weeps, which I know is a White Album, but just that George actually intended for Eric. It's not like Eric Clapton was called in the middle of the night to replace George's parts. That the plan was for Eric to actually play on that track, and that George left a lot of space for him to play. And just curious about what you know about that particular song and just how that one, kind of came out.
I remember watching that and thinking that was kind of strange because everything I'd ever read, said that, and I think there are tapes where George had played the solo on it, and they were still doing full band takes of it, and George was playing lead and could never quite get what he wanted, but he also felt like he wasn't getting the best from the band. So kind of like what happens with Billy Preston, he brings Clapton in. I think he and Clapton were driving into London together, and he was just kind of griping about, I've got this song, I know there's something to it, but we're just not getting it. Why don't you come play on it? Let's see what happens. And from what I had understood, it was a thing where once everybody came in, or once he came in, everybody was on their best behavior and really gave their all, because now they want to impress the guest. And that's kind of the moment where they get it. So I don't know, Paul, God bless him, has a tendency to kind of misremember things, which, you can't blame him. The guy's lived 1,000 lives in, his 80 years. But some stories seem to be slightly tweaked here and there.
Should it make the Beatles look better as a whole,
It makes them look better. It kind of adds to this whole, just this magical thing happens, he likes to kind of lean into the magical, side of the story now. But from everything I'd heard was that it was always kind of they tried to get it. He was never happy with it. He wasn't happy with what he was coming up with, and he didn't want Paul to let me take a shot at it. The song about a guitar. Now, let me be the guy. So bringing in Eric was kind of a good way to add a little extra firepower to it.
But once again, it was George's idea. It wasn't like they called Eric Clapton in the middle of the night to replace parts or any of that crazy, the rumor mill about that,
Mike, I like how you
it was his call.
Conversation from the film. We brought Jonathan on specifically to talk about the film, and then you missed your assignment and didn't watch part 3. So to cover the fact that you know nothing about part 3, you shifted the conversation to an entirely different film.
It's just about George. But wait, I have a good reason why I couldn't watch this. I went to see my daughter play in Jackson. She played yesterday and the day before, and I had to drive home last night. Nice. She had a great game. Yes, well, she double doubles on both days. But yesterday they played not a very good team. She had 6 or 7 threes, so she scored I think she only played 10 minutes because the team wasn't very good. They won 70 points.
I know that you're talking about basketball, but you've lost me with lingo. So at least tell the people the game and who she plays for.
She plays for Rhodes College. It's basketball. And she's having an amazing season. She's averaging double doubles every game on the stat line, averaging 15 points a game and 12 rebounds a game. So she's having a great senior year. She's having fun. The last year, I get to enjoy it. So we're happy she's having fun. And last year was a lost year. She actually qualifies. The NCAA gave them all. She could actually go and play for somebody next year and get a year graduate school. Scholarship. So she's considering it because of COVID. So we'll see where if she decides the thing is, she's trying to find a school that has a graduate program that she's interested in. Then she'll try to take her 5th year. Yeah. It's amazing that sports get you further than academics, because she's a fucking 4.0 student at Rhodes College, and that doesn't count for anything. But she can play ball, so let's get her in here and give her some money. It is a sad state of affairs, but
America, what a country!
What a country!
Well, if you go to Liverpool now, you can get an MBA in Beatles at Liverpool University. They have a master's program in Beatles, which I for years I have no desire to go back to school, but man, I'm kind of jonesing to get into that program.
I'm wondering if you should go teach at that program. You'd be like, well, guys, let me it's an American's point of view. It wouldn't even be it wouldn't even be right. It'd just be an American's point of view. It'd be fun.
Hey, have you listened, Jonathan,
it'll
to
be
the
loud,
Naked?
So it'll be right.
Have you listened to the I think it's called the Naked podcast, Get Back or Naked podcast that's going on along with this movie?
I know there's a podcast called The Beatles Naked that's been around for a while, and then there's the Nothing Is Real podcast is doing a really good series right now. There's so many really great Beatles podcasts. There's an industry around it now. It's pretty great. There's a lot of them. I shouldn't say an industry because none of us are making money, but there's a really nice, I'll call it a scene. There's a Beatles podcast scene. That's a lot of fun with some really, really good people in it.
And you're actually in the scene with your guys' show, obviously, the tearing apart of the Beatles songs that you enjoy doing so often.
They've let us into their world foolishly, but it's been fun because there's.
Yeah, like how much lyrics changed. Like, "Give Me Some Truth" was a really different song. But "I Have a Dream."
Oh, yeah.
Even the words, the original words for "Something" were vastly different. You know,
Really?
it was quite interesting.
So when did the words for "Something" change? Because that was the other thing. Is like there's so many songs from Abbey Road that they were rehearsing at the same time. That obviously, they didn't get together. But I thought that was interesting too. I mean, him working with "Oh Darling" for the first time, coming in to record the demo of "Oh Darling" for the first time was really kind of awesome to watch that. You know.
Yeah.
But she came in through the bathroom window.
The acrobatics he can do vocally just while sitting is incredible.
It's crazy.
Like the things that he can do with his voice while just in a laid-back, casual, seated position that I have to be standing and like singing my balls off to do is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, he's definitely got a great falsetto. It's just
unbelievable.
Ridiculous.
You know.
Yeah.
He's got such a
Now, thinking about she came in through the bathroom window. Is that some sort of in joke with them or something? And what does it mean? Because like all through the thing, it's scattered where all of a sudden he'll just scream, "She came in through the bathroom window," but it's not like he's starting the song or anything like that. He's just sort of saying it. It suddenly made me wonder. It's like, is that like maybe not necessarily a song yet, but it's like just something that was some event that had happened to them that it's like an in joke or something like that. I don't know. It just made me wonder if maybe it was more of an in joke than a song. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. But he kept saying that.
I did notice that.
Maybe he just liked the phrase and he was just throwing it out there, testing it out, you know?
It did seem to be like he would do it to like lighten things, though. It would just be a moment of, so it just made me wonder, like maybe something had happened and it was some sort of in joke or something that eventually became part of the song.
I wouldn't doubt that at some point some, crazed teenage fangirl tried to climb into the bathroom window of his house or something. That wouldn't shock me in the slightest.
Right. And they all laugh. It's a way for them to get a laugh or whatever or something out of it.
Yeah.
So what other songs did they work on that
didn't
actually
make Let It Be?
It was really a joy.
It was really a joy to watch it go from literally them mumbling lyrics and words to that really strong performance on the rooftop. Just really great rock show up there.
By the way, is the rooftop show what made the record? Did they actually go back in the studio and record a bunch of stuff, or did some of that?
No, they showed like every time they did a cut, they did a version that was on the record. They would say this version appeared on the album.
Oh, I didn't notice that. All right.
When they went to the rooftop, they'd already canned performances of all the songs that they were going to do on the rooftop. So they already had like passable final studio performances of those songs. They went on the rooftop to see if they could capture live versions. And in some of the, obviously some situations, One After 909, I've Got a Feeling, those end up on the record. The other ones, I think they were just going to kind of see how they came out. I don't think a Don't Let Me Down version came out at the time. But yeah, the plan I think was always to have like part of the because they didn't want to do like the quiet ones on the roof because Winding Road isn't going to translate there, or Two of Us won't translate. But interestingly enough, they did have acoustic guitars up there. They did have the lap steel up there. There was an electric, like a clavinet or something was up there. So don't know what else they were going to try and do if things hadn't been shut down. It would have been interesting to know like what was the full intention with all that.
Oh, and that fucking anvil, right, from Maxwell Silver. At one point, I'm like looking, going, "What the fuck is?" Oh, that's the goddamn anvil. And I think they mentioned it shortly after that. But I'm like staring at that thing, just going, "What the fuck is that? I don't know. What is that?" And it was that damn. It was when they moved back to Apple, I guess, and suddenly it just winds up next to the drum kit, just sort of sitting there.
They had an actual hammer and an actual anvil.
Right.
They didn't
the most amazing thing is, they're starting to go through that song and they're breaking for lunch, and Paul goes, "Hey Mal, can you get us an anvil and a hammer?" And they come back from lunch and there's a fucking anvil and hammer. How hard is it to get an anvil in real life? Like, I don't know where to find an anvil in a half hour. That's amazing.
Right.
And like the weight of an anvil. Who brings an anvil in? That's incredible.
I know.
Like, it's mind blowing.
I thought the same thing.
Like the paces that they put Mal Evans through, where it's like, Mal, can you go get me a bow tie for no apparent reason other than he just wanted a bow tie that day?
Yeah.
Or can you get someone to bring over, multiple pairs of black leather shoes in a size 8 that I can try on? Like, any whim they had, this poor guy would fulfill.
Yeah.
Because this was his family, this was his home. And then when there's this great moment where they show at Apple and the camera starts in on his face and he's obviously just stoned out of his gourd, playing tambourine and staring into some, other planetary realm, just offbeat playing a tambourine is one of the funniest bits of the film to me. That poor guy. Oh,
yeah, because you always heard about
man.
Neil Aspinall, but you never really heard a lot. Like you said, Mal is sort of an unsung, and he was there from the whole time as well, right? I mean, with Neil, it was Neil and Mal.
Yeah, he goes back to the Cavern Club days of, like, I think 61, 62 with them. I think he was working at the Cavern, and it was like, you're a big motherfucker. Will you want to come help us, like, carry our gear and, like, ride with us? So that's what and then he was just the guy for everything. And if you ever see footage of them, of like post, I think it's like the Washington DC show, he's the only crew member. Like, he's grabbing the drum kit at one time. Like, he's got the kick drum in one hand, a rack tom, and the snare drum all at once. Like, he's carrying all the gear. He's moving everything. He sets everything up. He's the only guy. And, I mean, God bless the guy. The rest of his story post Beatles is kind of sad. The way he ends up dying is really sad. But he was the most committed guy they could have asked to have in their circle. So I'm glad to see him get a little bit of camera time and I guess some overdue respect and story time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I actually saw him more than I saw Neil in the video, in the footage. Like, I think I only saw Neil a couple times.
I think Neil only shows up like once. Yeah, only once or twice. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I love too is that when they go to show up at Apple and fucking Magic Alex, they're like, there's so much and he just so much noise. The equipment is just not up to par, so they have to take 3 days off now and bring in a studio from EMI to put it in the space. And I think the only thing Alex got right was those fucking things behind him that could be either a hard surface or a soft surface, where they kept spinning. I think that's the only thing he got right, and the whole fucking thing was that. It was, it was fun for me.
One of my only regrets in the film was I'd always read about what a shit show Apple Studio was when they showed up. And it shows in the movie, like, cameras were not allowed in that day. I really wanted to see how bad it was. Because, his thing was like, EMI gives you 8 channels. I can give you 1,000 channels. And all he did was install a bunch of speakers around on the wall around the control room. I really wanted to see how bad it was, like, in reality. I wish we could have seen that. That really kind of, like, was interesting to me.
Right. But, without any understanding of phase or how any of that works, and even watching their little speaker setup, when they kept switching to that, showing the thing, I'm like, there's no way that this sounds right. This is not what Jeff Emmerich is listening to. This is when the band comes in, he puts it through that stuff so that he's not listening to this because there's no way that it worked. I mean, I know better. I know the way sound works. That wasn't working. But like you said, you could put 1,000 of them in the room and, hey, look at that. But they did, one of the things that was cool is that they did tie the 2 4-track machines together to get 8 tracks. And I'm not sure if that was because they kind of had a plan for that or whatever. I guess they were like, and I do know that was also those records, Abbey Road and Let It Be, was when Jeff Emmerich started using speakers as microphones for the bass, just with the transducer thing. Like the bass on Come Together and stuff like that is actually recorded with a 12-inch speaker. At least one of the microphones is a 12-inch speaker that they used. And I played around with that for a minute. I think they started that
back on Paperback Writer, maybe, or some in Revolver sometime. They started playing with that.
Did they? Because when I was reading his book, he talked about the bass sounds on Abbey Road and how they Jeff Emmerich's book or whatever, and how they were using sort of the speakers as microphones just for the translation purposes. So, and I did notice that I used car stereo speakers for kick drum early in my back in the fucking 90s, and the thing that was so funny is that the kick drum in my car sounded fucking like it did in the room. It was the weirdest fucking thing, It's just like by using that speaker to translate, it actually did translate on car stereo speakers. So I started recording some of the bass instruments with these little fucking Jensen speakers that I had, and it fucking worked great. It was amazing. I was like, God, it sounds like the instrument. Awesome. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I mean, you had to add a lot of high end and stuff because it didn't. There was some tricks you had to do to it to make it work, but it really was amazing. The response, mainly on the low end, was just right on.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was really interesting that I think was overlooked a lot before this was the presence that George Martin had. When they first show up at Twickenham and when they first get to Apple, he's very much kind of detached from it. But as things start to really get to crunch time and they need to focus, he kind of does that parental thing of quietly pushing the boys to he's the one that has a set list in his pocket and says all of a sudden well, you've got this and this, and look, guys, you've got an album. And he's the one that there's a little bit of tension, I think, with him and Glenn Johns, who has kind of been the captain up until then. And then when George has to kind of push it over the finish line, he's the one that's fixing all the gear and working on the guitar tone, and he's I'll make the PA, I'll fix the PA, I'll make this happen. He's kind of the one coming in and saying, okay, I know you said you don't want my production shit on this record, but I also know you need me to get through this, so I'm just gonna do what I need to do to help my guys. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to see, because he always gets left out of the story on this record, I think.
And not to mention the first call they made when they walked in, and were listening to the stuff. They called George, said, "Hey, we need help. We need
Dad,
a studio." Yeah,
Dad, I need help.
Basically, yep. And so, and Dad came through. He started sending stuff over that day. So you're absolutely right. And it was fun though that they finish up this record basically because I look at it. Abbey Road was starting in this record as well, right? I mean, there's a bunch of songs from Abbey Road. You see it. And they decided to go and work with Dad to finish Abbey Road out.
Yeah. They get back together as soon as Ringo's done with Magic Christian. I think in early March, they're back together over at Trident Studios working on "I Want You, She's So Heavy" with Billy Preston and George Martin. They're immediately back to work. They were feeling good, I think, after the finish of that record, and they went right back into it. And there's outtakes of them working on "I Want You, She's So Heavy." Those sessions are on the Abbey Road box set, and they're fascinating. They're really, really cool.
Really different versions, completely. Wow.
There's some difference to it. It definitely starts out a little bit funkier, where Billy Preston's kind of more at the front of it. But it's a little bit slinkier, a little bit looser. They're going for a little more volume, I think, than just kind of that intensity that it builds to. But it's really, there's some cool stuff on those session tapes.
We listened to Abbey Road on the way up too. Because we did Let It Be and then we did Abbey Road, and so me and Paul were talking about this thing the other day. I had heard stories about they kind of did. The two sides are obviously very differently. One side's just singles, and then the other side's sort of that the musical, all the songs being tied together. Is that just done out of necessity, or was there sort of a John Lennon, Paul McCartney aspect to it that's always sort of been hinted at, that one side was for John and one side was for Paul? Did you hear anything like that?
That's kind of how they've presented it over the years. Was John wanted it to be all this on one side, and Paul wanted all this on one side. And there's been a lot of talk about that over the years. I think the medley came about because they had so many bits that weren't finished. And right. I think at some point the idea just came about of well, Mean Mr. Mustard, or Polythene Pan flows into Mean Mr. Mustard really well. I wonder if this would fit. And I think they were good at, they did it with A Day in the Life, of saying, oh, well, your bit works with my bit. And all of a sudden they're seeing these things. And by that point, The Who had done a quick one while he's away, and I think Tommy was probably out at that point. So the idea of that kind of thing wasn't foreign, but they were able to kind of say, well, we can do something similar, and like maybe let's make the whole side of the record this kind of thing. So it just kind of fell into that, I think. And because you see him working on Polythene Pam, Mean Mr. Mustard, Bathroom Window, Carry That Weight, which has a whole verse that's different to it that I thought was really cool. Maybe Golden Slumbers was touched at some point in there. Like
I thought Golden Slumbers was
record,
touched it's early on, right? Like,
and
I think so. Because he mentions it's like it's a traditional. What was it?
Oh, Darlin' he was working on.
Yeah, Oh Darling.
But that's one of the complete songs, though. That's one of the
Garden. Octopus's Garden came up to
Yeah. You realize like almost the whole record's there, like almost the entire record, and they're starting off January with a lack of material, and by the end of 27 days they've got almost 30 something songs to go. It's an incredible feat. It's absolutely incredible.
Some of their best songs ever show up in that particular, round of stuff. Some of my favorite stuff.
Yeah, and everything George brings, once George comes back, he takes all of his pre-existing songs off the table. Like he had brought in All Things Must Pass, Isn't It a Pity? There's a few, I can't remember the others, but a bunch of stuff that would end up on All Things Must Pass. He puts up for consideration, and they don't take them. So when he comes back, he takes everything off the table except for You Blue. And I Me Mine only makes it into the movie originally because there's this footage of John and Yoko waltzing around the studio as the other three play it that Michael Lindsay Hogg really wants to put in the film. So Paul, Ringo, and George go back to Abbey Road in January of '70. John's already split from the band, and the three of them go record I Me Mine. So that's how that ends up back in the film, yeah. That's like the last session that they do is the three of them doing I Me Mine.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. So George takes all of his shit and just says, okay, well, I'm only going to give you kind of new stuff I don't really give a shit about. So you get
like Something Blue, and Here Comes the Sun, and these are songs he didn't give a shit about, like some of the best songs he ever.
Talking about Let It Be.
I don't think that he.
Yeah,
I don't think that he didn't give a shit about him. Like I think he wanted the guys to kind of work with him on something, and maybe it didn't take as much as he thought it would, so he just kept kind of woodshedding it. But like he's like, here's Old Brown Shoe. Like I love the song. Is it his greatest work? No, but it ends up as a really great B-side.
Tell you what, the version of All Things Must Pass with the three of them singing harmonies together is just gorgeous.
That could have been something really special.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that just kind of
that's one I wish they'd have stuck with.
Yeah, but that was because of George's like freak out that it just never came back. Then, huh? That one just.
Yeah, I think he took it off the table, but also like they had enough slow songs. That's the other thing is like. There's not a ton of rockers on this record. Like, you've got Get Back, One After 909. Dig a Pony's not really a rocker, but it is, pretty rockin'. But everything else is, for the most part, kind of on the slow side.
Dig a Pony's like Black Sabbath rockin'. Like, it's a dirge, right? It's just one of those, it's heavy and it's not necessarily fast
It's heavy,
tempo.
but it's not like a fast rocker,
Right.
But, like, they have to bring back One After 909, which John writes when he's 15, which turns up great. That's one of my favorite tracks on that record. I think it's probably my favorite rooftop moment. Like they're just having a ball there. I love that. But they're not coming with the big fast rockers for that record,
right?
Which is unfortunate because there's some really great ones on the White Album. You've got obviously, like Helter Skelter, Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except for Me and My Monkey.
That's one of my
Back in
favorites
the USSR.
ever.
Like you've got a lot of fast ones, and you don't have a lot of fast ones here. Yeah,
and Monkey's like one of my favorites. Just and that's it's got to be him starting to mess around with heroin, right?
Probably.
That's my vision of it. It's him first starting to go. You know what? I'm. And it's probably a way to deal. I mean, I kind of hear that in the lyrics of that song. Just like, how do I deal with what let's check out. Let me just go and try this drug that makes me check out and show up for my film session like this.
Right.
the whole time, you know? And he just sat there like that.
Glass-eyed,
It was crazy. Every time they went to him, he just looked, like you said, like nobody was home. Like he just wasn't in the room. And
Yeah.
Ringo just always looked sort of like he knew it was coming to me. It just, I don't know, he always looked sort of sad. The only time he looked like he was having fun was when they were doing the piano bits with Martha, My Dear, and he comes in and he starts playing the other part of the piano. And him and Paul are playing
He has
together.
a little soft shoe.
Yeah, I thought that was,
Yeah.
it looked like he had the most fun doing that than anything else in the whole freaking movie, was just that little bit.
He always looked hungover to me, which, I mean, he was an alcoholic at some point, but there's a moment where they come in, I think it's on like a Monday. Like, good morning, Ringo. Not doing too good, boys. He's always got that like kind of redness around the eyes, and he sleeps a lot. Like he's always like kind of passed out back there. There's a moment, I think it's at Twickenham, when it's later in the day after Peter Sellers was there, and even Ringo says, I'm feeling ill. And then he kind of nods off too, and I'm wondering if he like took something that John had that maybe he wasn't used to. Because he never looked like great for about half of it. He looked like he was just kind of rough, but he dressed impeccably. Like he looked so sharp the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, who'd have thought he was like the best dresser of the group?
And if he was a drunk, he was a happy drunk. I mean, he never was.
For sure.
He seemed like he was happy all the time. But some of the times when he's sitting on the drums and they're like working out lyrics and stuff, that's what I was saying. He's so patient. He's just sitting there, and every time they'd start to go back, he'd start doing his little thing, and then wait for them to toss around, start looking around, doing whatever, and then here we go again, and I'm playing the okay, whatever. I'm just waiting for you guys.
We have run out of time for this week's episode. Jonathan, I want to thank you for joining us, just because it covered up for the fact that Mikey didn't finish watching the film.
Well, I'm happy to do it. Anytime you need somebody to come in and cover for Mikey's
a lack of homework. Yes. By the way, before we go,
this is a blast. Thank you.
Paul told me that he saw you guys play. You said Jonathan was playing with Andre on that Beatles cover thing,
Walrus,
right?
The Walrus
Yeah,
band.
the Walrus,
Great.
He told me it was great. I can't wait to, we used to do ourselves a Beatles thing, and I actually put out a YouTube. We did Walrus, actually, with Jimmy Robinson during the COVID thing. I'll send you a link to the YouTube. It was a lot of fun.
Please do. That's cool.
I heard Paul was like just going on and gushing about you guys and how good you were. And are you guys playing anytime soon, or?
Yeah, we've got a gig December 17th at 1201 Constantinople. The Constantinople stage. We'll be out there, I think, 6:30 to 8:30. I think we're doing it with the Electric Yacht Quartet, the string quartet. I think.
Nice.
I could be mistaken. I think it's with the strings.
Nice.
But yeah, those shows are super fun. It's been really fun to like dive into those songs, not just from like a listening and kind of like studying standpoint for the show, but like to immerse them as a player and really get to learn them. And that has changed some of my thoughts on different songs that like I kind of discarded before. And now I'm like, holy shit, Tell Me Why from A Hard Day's Night is a blast to play. I love this song. I should probably have this 20 songs higher than I did, like it's a lot of fun. Those shows are really fun. And Paul's obviously always overly complimentary about what we do, but I appreciate it.
I can't wait. I'm gonna have to come out and see you guys. That's for sure.
Please do.
On my calendar.
It really was pretty amazing. Dave Pomerleau, it was a revelation as a singer. He was just fantastic. Your vocals just killed. And then Andre's playing piano and drums at the same time, and my mind's exploding. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, what can't this guy do?
Right.
Yeah.
And then like our guitarist Felix is over there, just like he can do all the George parts, and then like we have certain songs that we kind of extend and let him just kind of like go off in his own little world, and he just kills it. Like he's a great player. It's so much fun, and it wouldn't exist as it does had it not been for the McCartney tribute show that you put together in 2014, Paul. So thank you for that.
Neat.
Great, thank you.
So,
very neat. Well, it's been a fun show.
All right, well, it's been fun.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
And hey, man, we have to do this again sometime, Jonathan. Especially
Please. Would love
more
to.
Beatles stuff. I'm sure there's gonna be, it's Christmas time, so hopefully we won't wait till next Christmas when another Beatles thing comes out. That
or maybe when you watch.
What's that, Paul? Maybe
when you finally watch the third film.
Yeah, there you go. So by Friday, maybe we can do this again by Friday and do a half-hour show.
All
I'll
right.
send y'all. I'll send y'all the list of songs coming up in the first half of next year for the show, and let's find a couple that
Great.
y'all want to make fun of me on, and we'll do
Oh,
them
I'd
on y'all's
love
show
to
as
come
well.
make fun of you on some of those things. In fact, I'll
That'd be
start
great.
reading
Yes,
up just
let's
so I
do
can
it.
do it.
Yes.
So, well, thanks everybody.
Thanks again,
for tuning in, and we'll see you
Thanks,
guys on
y'all.
Wednesday. Bye now.
All right.
Well, I used to keep my money in a cookie jar. It was shaped like a cat, it was a present from my brother. I read a lot of books, but I couldn't see between the lines. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't mind. Well, her hair is as black as an alleyway, and it used to be red, and it used to be blonde. Truth is, her hair changes color all the time. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't mind. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't mind. Well, I'm staring at her shoulder, but it's not what I see when I hear two fellas fighting in the booth across from me. So I wipe away the ashes from an empty counter seat, and I wished I wasn't homesick, I wish I was asleep. Well, I hold her like a blanket up against my chin, and I need her like I need another pack of chewing gum. Well, we used to be like that, but now we're like this all the time. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't mind. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't mind. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't mind.